Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
And for those of you listening, this is going to make sense. For those of you listening on the podcast at a future point in time, not the live broadcast of the station, I'm referencing the last break, which John brought up, the name Mike Lindell, which is interesting because he put Mike Lindell and Jay Ashcroft in the same sentence, essentially saying this guy who's this election expert is a wacko. Isn't that pretty much what they said?
I think he's, yeah.
Okay.
Wacko is your word, yes. Dr. Douglas Frank.
Okay. Here's my crazy thing with Mike Lindell. Okay, I know he's done some weird stuff, but there are people that I think we all know these people who you look at them and you think, God, that guy's sort of messed up. But most people do have redeeming qualities. And I will never forget the time I met Mike Lindell in person at the grand opening of the Salvation Army thrift shop in, I don't know if that would be St. Charles or St. Peter's, right there, It's St.
Charles. It's right there at 364 and Harvester, right?
Right. And Mike Lindell flew into St. Louis specifically for the grand opening of the Salvation Army. Now, why is Mike Lindell a big fan of Salvation Army? Because Mike Lindell is a recovering addict, and anybody who is a recovering drug person, especially alcoholic, you don't ever cure alcoholism, as I understand it. It stays with you for your entire life. And Mike Lindell had a very checkered past with drugs and alcohol and the whole bit. And he supports organizations that work with people. And once again, I was involved with the Salvation Army for many, many years, working, in St. Charles County, their Tree of Lights campaign and a bunch of stuff like that. And not that I'm pounding my chest, but I was the chairman for the committee and quite honestly, I didn't really do as much as I should have done. But I think they had me just as because nobody else would do it. Maybe that's probably the reason. But Mike Lindell flew into town, and not a gesture of trying to help the Salvation Army. He donated, when I say a wall full of products. To this day, if you go into that store right there, you walk in the front door and you turn to the right, the door, which would be, the wall, which would be to the parking lot, which would be, I guess, on the south or the west end of the building, whichever way you think that would be, which is maybe 100 feet long, from floor to ceiling, was stocked with all his products that he gave to the Salvation Army. So in other words, and he was selling, everything was being sold like at half price. So even if it was half price, if it was a pillow, it was $30, Salvation Army got $30. He got nothing. And every single penny, and he would meet people, he would talk with people. He reminded me a lot of Trump because he's got that one-on-one vibe that he can talk to people and shake their hand and thank them for coming and make them feel real important, you know what I mean? Not like the Joe Biden kind of thing who's sort of aloof. And, and I'm not making fun of Joe Biden. Well, maybe I am to a certain extent. But let's be honest. If you're in a crowd and you meet Donald Trump, he has that charisma, sort of that one-on-one magic. Wouldn't you sort of agree with that, John?
I think so, yeah. And I think he projects that. You don't have to meet him in order to feel that.
Right. And Mike Lindell's the same way. And every time I hear people talk about, that Mike Lindell, you know what? He's done some goofy stuff. I don't necessarily agree with what he said. He's in trouble. He's being sued by this person and that person because his deal with the election, the whole bit. But I don't know. It bothers me.
This would be a good opportunity for you to post. I'm not a Facebook guy, but I know that as somebody born prior to 1970, you are constitutionally required to be on Facebook. So why don't you post a picture of you and Mike Lindell as a social experiment and see How many of your friends, Brad, weigh in on it?
I've done that before, and it's
I know. I think you should do it again. We could report back, see what happens tomorrow.
You would not believe the hate I got. I mean, people go, "I can't believe you took a picture with that guy." I mean, once again, here's a man who, and the reason he feels so personal about the alcoholism and the addict, because he was there. I mean, he was a drug addict. He was an alcoholic, and I've got this special place in my heart. I'm lucky. Me, none of my family members, nobody's been, addicted to drugs, alcohol. I have nobody. Matter of fact, it's funny. I get asked all the time. I don't know if I've told you this story, John. It's sort of funny. I get asked all the time if I'm an alcoholic. Do you know why that is?
Because you don't drink.
Nobody ever sees me drink.
And I know exactly what you mean.
When you go to a bar or a party where everybody's drinking, the guy or gal who stands out is the person not drinking. And most of the time, that person, well, I shouldn't say most of the time, but chances are that person not drinking is a recovering alcoholic. Am I being honest when I say that?
I don't know what the percentage of it is, but I'll give you an example, and I don't mean to hijack your story here, but I don't drink anymore, and I'm not an alcoholic. When I don't have a problem with alcohol. Before the pandemic, or when the pandemic started, I decided I was not going to be one of those people that sat around at home and drank. So I just stopped drinking. So, yeah, but you're right, though. People look at you kind of funny, and it's like, can we drink in front of John? It's like, take shots. Do whatever you're going to do. Like, that has nothing to do with me.
Right. Doesn't bother me. Do what you want.
Yeah, not at all.
Just don't meet me out on the highway after you've been drinking. That's my other pet peeve.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
What people forget about Mike Lindell, too, is that he had that major east-west thoroughfare in the city named after him. It used to be called Cervantes, and now it's called Lindell Road.
John, he's throwing a curve there. Okay, John,
I'm here.
When you chop up these shows, make sure you footnote this. Make sure you put a link on this one to Jane Dueker. Okay, will you do that for me?
Yeah, nice. Of course I will.
Here's my Jane Dueker reference. First off, the amazing thing is, if Jane Dueker is an attorney. Once upon a time, she was like chief of staff for one of the governors, wasn't she? Like
for Governor Bob Holden. That's absolutely right.
Okay, she's currently a lobbyist, and I think her lobbyist people include the city and county police. Aren't I correct in that?
I'm not sure if it's city and county. It might be both of them, though. Correct. Yeah, I know she's represented the police for quite a while.
Right. Okay. She was on Reardon's show, but it wasn't Reardon. It was Mike Ehlmann on Friday, because Reardon I'm thinking to myself, where was all this vacation when I was in the radio business? Reardon takes more days off than he works. Okay.
Well, good for him, Brad.
Okay. Neither here nor there. I'm not going to say good for him. If you got a job, work the damn job. Don't take vacation all the time. Okay. So anyway, Mike Ehlmann filled in for him, and he had Jane Dueker on, and she was talking about the police situation in the city of St. Louis. She was talking about how the numbers don't tell the true story, that they're down to 800 police officers. She went through this whole crazy thing and pointed out the fact that of those 800 police officers, there's if I'm not mistaken, I think she said 200 of them who don't work anymore. And you know what the reason for that is?
Why is that?
I may have this wrong, but this is what I interpreted what she said. They have so much vacation time accrued that they're just taking all their vacation time, and then on their last day of vacation time, they're going to retire. So in other words, they've already pretty much retired.
So they're already gone. And by the way, let's not fault them for taking advantage of the system. Well, if the system is there and you have your vacation time, continue to get paid and then retire.
Well, I'm not saying anything bad. I'm essentially saying...
I know you're not. I'm just there are probably people listening that think that's terrible.
Well, no.
But hey, that's the way the law is written.
Well, once again, you get it, use it, especially if you're working for a public entity, what the hell, you know?
Yeah, I got you.
So anyway, she starts crunching down the numbers. And what she comes down to is, she talks about there's X amount of officers who are not on the beat, and there are X amount of officers administrative, X amount of officers do this, X amount of officers that. She says there's 400 cops on patrol in the city of St. Louis. And I'm going, what? Now, think about that for a minute. 400. Now, take 400 and divide that by 3, which means that if you have 3 shifts, I think they're still working 8-hour shifts in the city. Some departments going to 12. Some for a while, tried some other crazy things. I think
so that's less than 150 per shift is what you're saying.
Wait, and then you make that even further because of the fact that most of the guys aren't working 7 days a week. They're taking a couple of days off.
Yep.
They're working 5 days a week. So what you're talking about is the entire city, there's maybe 75, 80 officers on duty in the entire city at any point in time.
I know what you're getting at, Brad, and you're right. It is wrong for Steve Ehlmann to be poaching all these officers.
No.
I agree with you, Brad. I'm on Team Tish Tosh.
So
why is Steve poaching all the city officers? People are lined up to work. They want to work, Brad, in North City. They want to go down to Easton Avenue after dark and do a little community policing, do a little social work. Who doesn't want to go down to Easton Avenue and help somebody work through a mental problem they have, Brad?
John's making fun of the fact that we had Steve Ehlmann live and in person on this show, and I went before the county council a couple months back and talked about this. And what's so funny is that Steve, at the county council meeting brought up the fact that this couldn't be further from the truth, that they do no recruiting in the St. Louis area, not in the city, not in the county, not in St. Charles, because I think he put it, if you know you want to work for a good department, that's St. Charles County, right? And I think that's essentially what he said.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said.
He said the recruiting they do is essentially out of the area. I think he said they recruit at the college campuses in University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. He mentioned another college. I think
down
he said
at Springfield, I think, at Missouri State. I think he said
Missouri State, and I believe he also said someplace else, might have been Warrensburg or something like that. But essentially, they don't even recruit in the St. Louis area because of the fact that most people, let's be honest with you, if you lived here for a long time and you go to your mom and you go, you're 21, you go to your mom, you go, hey, Mom and Dad, I think I want to be a cop in the city. Your mom and dad's going to say, you want to be a cop in the city? No, you don't want to be a cop in the city. If you want to be a cop, go to work for St. Charles County. Go to work for Ladue or De Pere or Town and Country. That's where you want to be a police officer. And
well, hey, let's get back to Elam's show in for Mark Reardon on Friday.
Okay.
Jane is one of those, and I know she wouldn't take this personally, but she's a dinosaur in the sense that she is a law and order Democrat. And if you are a law and order Democrat, what place do you have, certainly in urban politics anymore? And then I would make the argument in some parts of Missouri, just beyond St. Louis City, maybe Kansas City and other places, if you were a good old law and order Democrat like a Jay Nixon, you have no place in the Democratic Party anymore.
Well, we're exactly right. And what you're doing is you're typifying, she is a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. She'll be first to admit that. But what John essentially is saying is she's not the typical Democrat anymore because of the fact that she's very much against what's happened in the city of St. Louis with the policing. And, once again, it's not an issue of a budget because what are the cities still sitting on, what is it, like $400-500 million? A half?
Yeah, of what should be reparations money, but go ahead.
In the Rams deal, okay, and they make no effort. And see, the problem is, once again, if I go to here, I'm going to just do this randomly. I'm just going to go to the front page of the Post-Dispatch, and any money, I'm just going to hit Post-Dispatch on my phone right now. And any money, well, I was wrong. And there was the top story. Cicadas leave their eggs in St. Louis. but there was a story earlier on here about 6 people shot in downtown. Here it is. 6 people shot, 1 killed in downtown St. Louis. Okay, so once again, what does that make the average person who lives, let's not just say in St. Charles County, but let's say they live in Madison County, Illinois, they live in Monroe County, Illinois, they live in Jefferson County, Franklin County, Warren County, Lincoln County. Do they want to go downtown for dinner? No. Do they want to go downtown for the symphony? No. Or Midtown, whatever you want to call it. Do they want to go anywhere? Do they, by chance, want to go to the baseball game? Lately, if you look at the attendance, no. Because why? You might get carjacked, shot, killed, hit, accosted, raped, right? And the reason is because the cops know that they can get away with all sorts of stuff because there's limited police presence. That's all there is to it.
One of my favorite moments, Brad, from the BS show of you and Shelley Barr was sometime, I think it was probably 2023. It might have been 2022. When you and Shelley were talking about the factory out here in Chesterfield and how, and by the way, which is a great idea to have a small to mid-sized venue out here where if you want to go somewhere and see a comedian or a musical act, you can do it and worry much less about being carjacked or being attacked when you're in Chesterfield. But Brad, you had the theory that to make it feel more like the Del Mar Loop and to make it more like the pageant, they were actually importing carjackers in to prey on the parking lot to make people give a little bit more of that urban experience.
Did I really say that?
Yeah, It was a highlight.
Well, once again, if you go to the pageant, you're sort of on your own. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
you get the carjacking experience you paid for. And one of the things that Jane Dueker talks about a lot, and one of the things where she gives kind of her origin story, is her respect for law and order came from the barn at Lucerne. And there was a guy that would come in there and would spin records. And he was one of those North County boys. So first of all, you got to keep a close eye on those type of people. You know what I mean? But because this North County boy was bringing the criminal element, so to speak, into the barn at Lucerne, Jane developed a real appreciation for the boys in blue who would crack down on those type of guys. I forgot that DJ's name. I'm sure he's not around anymore. At his age. Who makes it to 89? Yeah.
John is making fun of me because I've told the story one time. This has probably been, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I'm driving along, listening to Jane Dueker and Mark Reardon, and they started talking about what's the most embarrassing things your parents ever did. And Jane starts talking about the fact that her parents owned a disco. And as she started describing the disco, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I worked for Jane Dueker's parents, which I did. Jack and Pat Ehlmann, her maiden name is Ehlmann, owned a place. Matter of fact, it was two married couples. The one guy was, I can't remember his name. He was the mayor of Baldwin, and his wife. And Jane Dueker's mother and father owned a disco that I worked at called the Distillery at the Barn at Lucerne. At the time, it was very upscale disco and wine world. They had me out there. But so that's my connection to Jane Dueker, that once upon a time I worked for her parents at her disco, and she's still embarrassed about the fact that once upon a time her parents owned a disco. So how's that?
I thought you were going to say she's embarrassed about the fact that her parents associated with you and hired you, Brad.
Well, you know what? Her parents, I will say this again, and I have a feeling they're probably no longer with us because of the age, and I think with Jane Jane's like in her 50s now, isn't she?
Yeah, I think probably mid to late 50s. Yeah.
Well, I hope that her parents are still alive, because they were two of the nicest people in the world, and especially her mother, Pat, couldn't have been any nicer to me. And it's one of those things where sometimes you work in environments, especially like if you've ever worked in the club, restaurant environment, sometimes the owners, managers can be, shall we say, anal orifices. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get exactly what you're saying.
And her parents were super nice. Her mother, like I said, her mother, Pat, was super nice to me, very supportive of me. And I guess I was, at the time, I was 20, 21 or something like that. I was just barely legal. I guess I was 21. I had to be 21 to work there. So anyway, we have to take a break. Lots of stuff to talk about, John. I got my whole list, and I'm not doing very good at getting through it, but we'll cover a lot in the last segment.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?